All right, let's dive into a scenario that honestly feels like it's been ripped straight out of a techno thriller, but the ideas behind it, they're frighteningly real. We're talking about something called the silicon shock, and it all kicks off with one big question.
Really think about that for a second. Our whole digital life, our pictures, our work, our money, the very infrastructure of our society, it all lives in the cloud. We think of it as this abstract, untouchable thing, right? But what happens when someone decides to make it a very real, very physical target?
Well, in this scenario, that's exactly what goes down. In early 2026, the idea of cyber warfare gets a brutal physical upgrade. Drone strikes hit Amazon Web Services data centers. And just like that, the invisible cloud becomes terrifyingly vulnerable, and the fragility of our connected world is on full display for everyone to see.
So first things first, let's unpack the immediate damage. What happens when the cloud actually comes under fire? And forget about DDoS attacks or malware, we are talking about kinetic warfare, actual physical force smashing into the heart of our digital world.
Okay, so look at the specifics here, because this is where it gets really interesting. AWS confirms the hits on 3 data centers in the UAE and Bahrain. And the genius of the attack is that it's not just about blowing up servers. Nope, it causes critical water damage to the cooling systems. And without cooling, those billion-dollar GPU-packed facilities, they're basically just giant useless space heaters. This one attack immediately forces every major tech company on Earth to completely rethink its strategy. The cloud is no longer a safe bet.
So, the big question is, how did we even get to this point? An attack this bold doesn't just happen in a vacuum. It was the direct result of a geopolitical spark that basically set the entire globe on fire.
It all starts in late February 2026. The US and Israel launched these massive, coordinated military operations targeting Iranian infrastructure. The immediate result? The Strait of Hormuz, one of the most critical choke points for global trade, is paralyzed. It's effectively shut down. And that single act is the match that lights the fuse on a global economic crisis.
And that brings us to the real core of this whole thing, what we're calling the silicon squeeze. It's this absolutely devastating chain reaction that starts with something as old school as oil, but ends up choking the supply of the microchips that are supposed to power our future.
It all boils down to this one number, 20%. A full fifth of the entire world's seaborne oil has to pass through that strait. You just can't turn off a tap that big and not expect catastrophic consequences.
And here's consequence number 1. Projections show oil prices surging to $120 a barrel. Now, this isn't just about paying at the pump for your car. This is about the cost of energy for everything. And that especially includes the most power-hungry industry humanity has ever created.
This chart just lays it out so perfectly. A single generative AI prompt, just asking a chatbot one question, takes 10 times more electricity than a simple Google search. So as oil prices go through the roof, the cost to simply run these AI data centers becomes impossibly expensive, almost overnight.
And hey, this isn't just some wild theory. Goldman Sachs had already predicted that this exact combo, soaring AI demand slamming into a choked energy supply, would make electricity prices just explode. This economic problem was rapidly turning into a massive political one.
Now, on top of this insane energy crisis, there was already a massive hardware problem. This graph shows it pretty starkly. Even before the conflict, there was a deficit of over 1.3 million of NVIDIA's best GPUs. The world was already starving for AI chips.
And the conflict takes that shortage and turns it into a full-blown catastrophe. All of a sudden, you've got logistical nightmares, getting anything anywhere. Shipping costs are skyrocketing, and then the US slaps on export restrictions that freeze billions of dollars worth of chips. It was, quite literally, the perfect storm.
So this entire house of cards just starts to collapse, and the shock waves, man, they go everywhere. Nobody was immune, but every part of the world started to feel the pain in its own unique way.
This table gives you a fantastic global snapshot. So in the Middle East, you have direct physical attacks and hardware bans that turn these multi-billion-dollar AI projects into stranded, useless assets. Over in Europe, the energy crisis leads to new innovation-killing taxes on AI. In North America, electricity inflation gets so bad the government has to step in, forcing the tech giants to eat the costs, which, they just pass on to us as consumers. And all across Asia, the supply chain chaos just grinds everything to a halt. So, back in the US, this whole crisis turns into a political firestorm. The government has to step in. They basically force the tech giants to start paying up. Microsoft sets this huge precedent by agreeing to pay a premium for its electricity and cover the costs of upgrading the grid. And that's the key takeaway here. The massive, massive cost of powering AI is now being shifted directly onto the balance sheets of big tech.
So what's the end game here? All of this turmoil, all this chaos, it pushes us into a new kind of Cold War, a great split in the AI market fought not with missiles, but with silicon and algorithms. The analysts call it a violent bifurcation, which is really just a fancy way of saying the AI world splits, hard, into two completely different paths. On one side, you have commercial AI, which just stagnates. It's too expensive to run, investment dries up. But on the other side, defense and government AI gets a blank check. We're talking massive funding for autonomous weapons and agentic AI for things like drone swarms.
This whole crisis gives birth to a brand new and frankly kind of scary concept, sovereign AI. After seeing AWS data centers literally get blown up, nations realize they just can't trust a global commercial cloud anymore. So the new arms race is to build their own localized, heavily defended, totally offline data centers to guarantee they control their own technological destiny.
And that's really the heart of the matter. The illusion that we all had of a safe, global, virtual cloud, it's been completely shattered. The new reality is a mad dash, a global race for technological independence, all because of the very real threat of physical attack.
Which really just leaves us with one final and pretty sobering question to think about. As our world fractures along these new technological fault lines, is AI, the most powerful tool humanity has ever created, going to be something that brings us together, or will it become the ultimate weapon that tears us apart?